Hi everyone, my name's Emily Febri. I'm also known as Ranger M. I'm an environmental communicator and educator, and I get to talk to a lot of different people about all things nature and conservation. I love to knowledge share, and that's what I want to do with you. So come on, let's go learn with Ranger M. Do you know what the emerald ash borer, goldfish, and buckthorn all have in common? Well, they're invasive species. And today we're at Sifton Bog and we're going to catch up with Madison and Sydney from the Invasive Species Center, who are going to tell us all about what invasive species are, how they spread, and what we can do to prevent the spread of invasive species. So come on. Thanks for joining me, Maddie and Sydney. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and your background?
Thanks for having us. My name's Madison. I'm a Program Development Coordinator at the Invasive Species Center. My role focuses primarily on education and outreach for forest invasives. So I do a lot of presentations, I go to conferences, I host workshops, develop new resources, things like that, really just to spread the word about invasives.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been there for about 3 years now. Before that, my life really just revolved around school. I did my master's in biology, but before that I did my undergrad in neuroscience.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and during that time I joined a biology lab because that degree was half biology, half psychology. So I joined a biology lab. That's where I met Sid here. Learned that I really like more of the environmental side of things. So I joined my master's in biology and we got to work on Chinook salmon together for a few years.
What a change up. I love that. That's awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
And this is Sid.
Yeah, hi. So I'm a recent hire with the ISC. I started in May. And prior to that, I was working with the provincial government on program delivery for projects to restore and conserve the Great Lakes.
Okay, very nice.
And so as Maddie alluded to, we met at school and we both have a fish biology background. And I also kind of had a meandering path getting to where I am today because I decided in the last year of my undergrad that I didn't want to be a medical doctor. And I fell in love with salmon and I completely changed my path. And then, yeah, blew off med school, went to grad school, and here I am.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love the switch from humans to completely into animals.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Can you tell us what exactly is the Invasive Species Center?
Sure, we're a not-for-profit organization. We're based out of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, we are basically just a big hub of collaboration and knowledge sharing. So our mission is to mobilize action against invasive species that harm the environment, economy, and society. So we do this in a number of different ways. We have a lot of resources on our website. We have fact sheets and species profiles, best management guides, things like that. But then we also have a lot of programs for people that they can join, get involved in on-the-ground action for invasive species. So we have our community science program, invasive species training program, municipal community practice, just to name a few of them. So we have a lot going on, and we work with a lot of different partners to, meet our mission goals. We work with provincial and federal partners, municipalities, conservation authorities, Indigenous communities, lots of different groups, the public as well.
What exactly is an invasive species?
Well, an invasive species is an organism, so it could be a plant, an animal, an insect, or a pathogen that's introduced to an area, and then it causes either environmental, social, and or economic harm. And it has to cause harm in one of those three buckets in order for it to be considered invasive.
Sometimes animals are introduced here, but they don't cause that? There is a difference, right?
So yeah, exactly. Sometimes a species can be introduced to a new area, it can hitchhike its way here, and the habitat it finds itself in just doesn't support its growth or survival. So maybe it's too cold or there's not enough food sources for it, and they won't be able to establish, and it'll kind of just become a non-issue. But there's other times that species are introduced and it can cohabitate with the natural environment and really even sometimes cause benefits. So the first thing that comes to mind is food crops like wheat and corn, for example. Like they've been brought here and now people rely on them pretty heavily for food. So, yeah.
So how do different invasive species spread within our ecosystems?
In lots of different ways. It really just depends on the type of invasive species. Maybe we can go through and see what we can find.
Sounds great to me.
Okay, let's go.
So I bet there's a lot of different aquatic invasive species.
Yes, there's been a few goldfish reported here on EdMaps, and I was glad to see the signage that you have over there. So goldfish are a common household pet. They've been household pets like dating back to China, the year 960. So like a super long time. It's a fun fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, the common way that goldfish end up in waters that they're not supposed to is because people dump their pets. And so we have a whole campaign that's like, don't let it loose, like don't let your goldfish loose. So if you don't want it anymore, either rehome it with a pet store like aquarium, or donate it to a school so that children can like learn with it. Because once goldfish get into waters like this, they compete and they predate with native species. So they'll compete with native fish, native turtles, so like snapping turtles. And when they're feeding, they really kick up a lot of the bottoms, like the sand and the dirt, and then that can decrease the water quality and affect native aquatic plant growth as well. And then once they're in waters like this, they can get way bigger than they can in your home aquarium. So they can actually get up to the size of like a football.
Wow.
Yeah, with females looking even bigger than that, just with the way that they have their body composed. They're a bit more plump. So yeah, they're like very big. And then
kind of startling.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like you could see all the clips in the news, like they show like the giant goldfish, and that's how big they can get. And so they're usually either like the typical orange color, or they can be even green and like a cream kind of color. Yeah. Turtles are another common pet that people let loose. And one that we're a little concerned about is the red-eared slider. So that is an invasive one that's getting into the waters and competing with our native turtles. And so it competes with them by taking up the good sunning spots and habitat, and then they're competing for food as well.
And I actually heard that the red-eared slider is commonly mis-ID'd for the painted turtle that is native here. But a really good way to tell them apart is the painted turtle has the yellow marking behind the ear, and the red-eared slider obviously has the red spot behind their ear. So just might help when IDing invasive species.
Exactly.
So obviously the really big key for the goldfish and turtle is not to release your pet. Definitely reach out to pet stores or someone, or maybe another friend who's interested.
Yes,
or like you said, I
rehome it.
really like the idea of the classroom.
Yeah.
That's a really smart idea for kids to learn from animals as well. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, let's go find another example.
Okay, let's go.
So as we're walking through a park like this, I think it's really important just to pay attention to the health of the trees around us. So you can look up at the canopy, we can see if there's any type of leaf discoloration, premature leaf drop, if there's any insect feeding, for example, defoliation. We can also look at the bark and the trunks as we walk by, so pay attention to things like exit holes or egg masses laid by insects as well.
Okay, and tell us, what
I
are you
do
holding?
have some emerald ash borer. These are a really big problem. A lot of people already know about emerald ash borer, but they're wood-boring insects that were first detected in Canada, actually in Windsor in 2002, and it spread quite rapidly since it was first discovered. They do bore into the trees, and they attack and kill ash trees. So they've killed up to like 99% of the ash trees that they come in contact with in an area. So much so that black ash has now been listed as an endangered species.
Wow, that is wild to think that little
And they're so
critter.
tiny, but big impacts.
And why is it always the pretty ones?
I know, it's unfortunate.
So how did they spread into Canada?
So they came from overseas. It's thought that they came in wood packaging materials.
Okay.
And then they spread locally. They can fly around themselves, and a big one is firewood. So we really preach, do not move firewood and burn where you buy, because you really never know what's underneath the bark.
Okay.
These are the adults, and they'll fly around and you'll see them out and about, but they'll have larvae underneath the bark that you never know what's underneath there. So they could easily be transported with you as you go, if camping, for example, or leaving a park like this, just leave everything where it is.
Yeah. You know what? Support the local economy where you travel. Buy
Exactly.
firewood there.
Exactly.
So what plant is this?
This is buckthorn. It's invasive buckthorn. We have a huge wall of it. It can get quite tall. It can kind of range from like smaller plants to much bigger shrubs just like this. But it is an invasive shrub. It got brought over. People actually brought it to plant along fence lines as windbreaks in agricultural fields. But it can grow in a range of habitats, ranging from like low light levels to higher light levels, and it really just thrived and spread out from there.
Right.
So now it can be seen. It's very widespread. But yeah, this is what the plant looks like. They're dark green leaves. They do have these berries that are kind of in clusters, and the branches sometimes end in these thorns when they're a little bit older.
Okay. And once it was brought over, how did it kind of spread?
Spread in a couple different ways. One of the ways, these berries, birds will actually eat these berries, and they're kind of mildly toxic, and they have this laxative effect. So birds will eat the berries, they'll go fly off, excrete their waste, and the seeds can grow whole new buckthorn bushes from that. They also have really fibrous roots, and they can have offshoots really easily.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
So you said that it was brought over for kind of more of a planting purpose, which really gets into kind of the horticulture way that invasive species are brought in, because our gardens can also have an impact, right?
No, absolutely. Yeah, people can well-intentionally, plant things that look pretty in their yards and not knowing that it's invasive. A lot of garden centers sell these types of plants, so they're kind of easy to get your hands on, unfortunately.
Yeah. What impacts does this plant kind of have on our local ecosystems?
Well, one of the biggest things is they form these really dense bushes, so it's really hard for anything underneath of them to grow. So they really shade out other plants and outcompete them.
Yeah. Is it okay for the birds to continually eat these? If they're
They do it. It's probably not, they're really not that nutritious, so it's not giving the bird anything that they really need. That's another problem, because they could be feeding on lots of other types of healthy, nutritious native berries.
Unfortunate for them.
Yeah.
So what can someone do once they find invasive species in a natural area?
So there's two things they can do. They can call the invading species hotline, or they can download the EdMaps app or go on the EdMaps website. And through either of those, you can report new sightings. And so I'll show you just here on the app. If you go to new sightings, you can put in the species that you've detected, you can add images, and you can even do GPS location. And then when you submit this, there's experts who go through the entries and they'll verify if it is indeed an invasive species.
I was going to say, what if someone didn't know the name but kind of just recognized
and
it?
sometimes we get close calls, and that's still good. Even if it's just suspected and it's not confirmed, it's still a really great thing to submit online. And a good report includes a detailed location and a clear image. We need both of those things to really be able to accurately determine if something's an invasive species or not.
And by calling the hotline, is it similar? You're just kind of verbally giving the report?
Yeah, similar process. It just makes it more accessible if folks aren't used to apps in an online format.
Yeah. What do you guys do with that information? Do you then kind of give it on to other organizations? Do you take on kind of removal as well?
It's used in a lot of different ways. EdMaps, it stands for the Early Detection and Distribution Mapping System. And so it's a really great tool to really just see where public reports have been made for invasive species. So you can go for basically any type of invasive species and look up where it's been reported in the past by different people. So it's not an exhaustive list of where they're all found, but it gives you a really good idea of where they might be in your area. So different people use that information for different reasons. Researchers can use it to select different research sites, for example. So yeah, it's a really great tool.
We can use it to find a location.
Exactly. Yeah,
film Ranger
Exactly.
Very nice. So we talked about different ways that you can prevent the spread of pets. Don't release them. Buy firewood where you're going to burn it. Maybe don't plant invasive flowers or plants in your gardens. What are some other ways that we can help prevent the spread of invasive species?
Yeah, well, a big one is to brush off your boots. So I brought these little boot brushes. So when we're walking through a trail like this, invasive plants, there's seeds that get on the ground, it can get stuck in the mud and then stuck on your shoe, and you can take them with you when you leave the park. So a great tool is to carry a little boot brush with you and just scrub off the bottoms of your shoes to make sure you're not carrying any of those invasive seeds with you.
I love that.
So besides brushing off your boots, you can also just try to stick to the trails, keep your dogs on a leash, keep them on the trails with you. If they happen to wander off, give them a scrub too. They should get a scrub anyway, but maybe a little extra wash if they go off trail.
I get Finnegan a wash no matter what.
Yeah.
Ticks galore, Oh,
definitely, definitely.
We didn't see any watercraft users today, but a good rule of thumb is to keep your watercrafts clean, drained, and dry, and that actually is the law in Ontario.
Oh, okay.
So whether it is a paddleboard, a kayak, a canoe, or a motorboat, just make sure that you're draining all the water off of it. So if you have a live well, drain the bilge, wipe it all down, and then leave it out in the sun to dry before you transfer it to another body of water, and that will really prevent the spread of not just aquatic fish, but things like zebra mussels, aquatic invasive plants.
Awesome. If someone wanted to find more information about invasive species and maybe specific details on how they can prevent the spread, where should they go to find information?
We have tons of information on the Invasive Species Center website. It's just the invasivespeciescenter.ca. We have species profiles on tons of different types of invasive species of all different taxa, you know, plants, aquatics, things like that. So lots of free information there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Maddie and Sydney, for joining me. This has been great and very informative. Now I got a brush, so I'm good to go. Yeah, thanks for joining.
Thanks so much for having us.
I'm here with Jeff Sharp from St. Clair Region Conservation Authority, and we're going to chat about invasive species in the forest. Jeff, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Awesome. I was wondering if you could tell us a bit about the major invasive species affecting our forests.
So obviously there's, European buckthorn. It's a big one, and it produces a berry, and birds eat the berry and spread it everywhere. And it grows in the understory, it grows in shade, it grows in full sun. So it kind of uses all the available habitat it can. And what it's doing is it's actually out-competing our natives. And that's the biggest threat, right? So it's coming in, it grows in, big thickets, shades anything growing underneath it, takes all the resources, so new plants can't regenerate. So yeah, it's really having a negative effect on Ontario forests, and there's quite a few other ones coming into the forest as well. Some intentionally, sometimes people are planting them on the margins of their property and it's creeping into the forest, and some are by accident, right, by the berries that are spread by wildlife.
With the rise of these diseases and invasive species, is it more caused by humans? Is it does climate change impact it at all?
Every disease is unique,
Yeah.
right? So I can't say,
True.
As of late, we had a couple really bad years of LDL, which is spongy moth, right? And it was really bad and impacting things quite heavily, like up in Grand Bend area. And there was all kinds of moths everywhere and caterpillars and defoliating, forests, whole forests, not just trees, like whole forests. And it was a significant impact. Obviously the entomologists the provincial entomologists would be looking at this and seeing how insect populations are varying and potentially climate change is having an impact on that. Personally, I'm not 100, I don't know all the science and the research behind everything to say that, all of these two new beach diseases are related to, human impacts, which they probably maybe were introduced, but not. I'd have to dive into the research.
No.
But that's a really good point. I'm here, I know a lot, but I don't know everything. And so, reading from good sources, right? So peer-reviewed sources, government sources that are doing the research, that have all the information, is where you're going to get your best information. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. I was just wondering, is this going to impact our economy a lot in the future? Like, I'm assuming quite a few trees are going to die, and we're going to lose out on obviously all of the ecological benefits of a tree. But
economically speaking, so there's going to, right now, the value of hardwood lumber is very low. And so when we have the case like now where beech trees are going to be impacted, the best management for that is to actually go and harvest more of it, right? To harvest it before it succumbs and dies, because when you go to harvest a tree, you want to harvest a living tree, because the quality of the wood is at its best. And that happened with ash quite a bit. We had all this dead ash, and people were trying to do salvage, and it became a hazard for the loggers because the trees were falling and they were breaking off, and they were a lot less predictable because the wood wasn't green, they say. So it's not, what's the best way? Not malleable, but it had more resistance to it, where when it's a dead tree and you're cutting off a dead tree, it breaks really quick. And so if a gust of wind came when you were cutting your tree and it broke and it went the wrong way, that's a hazard, right? The loggers know what they're doing when they're cutting a tree. So yeah, what's going to happen is, there's a risk to going and cutting all this dead material, but they're going to try and harvest as much of it as possible. Yeah, so it's just going to flood the market, and then there won't be a market for it, right? So then there's just going to be a lot left to fall and rot, and that'll, you know, be a thinning in a forest. Ecologically speaking, down woody debris is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right. It does actually improve, you know, forest soils. You know, rotting trees is a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when these species or diseases go through, like the emerald ash borer, are we seeing any, like, because that was quite a bit ago, in the early 2000s, I think.
Yeah, but it's still actually having an effect throughout Ontario, right?
Right.
It's moved into Eastern Ontario, but it's slowly creeping north.
Okay.
So now black ash has been listed as a species, a threatened species, through the Ontario Species at Risk Act.
Okay.
And they're looking at doing, because black ash has a significant economical value for logging in Central Ontario. They're trying to look at how they're going to preserve what they have, you know, collect seed so they keep the genetics, and then be able to reintroduce it, because what they've seen in Southern Ontario, you know, you could reintroduce it.
Okay, because that's what I was going to ask. Are we seeing ash kind of come back at all?
Yeah, so ash, because ash is a fairly fast-growing species, an early succession species, you actually find quite a bit of regen growing. So predominantly in Southern Ontario, in this area, it would be green, red ash, kind of the same species, and white ash. You see a lot of it coming back and growing as regen, because a lot of the trees produced seed when they were starting to be infected, and so now we're getting, you know, that 6 to 10 year age regen growing up in woodlots. So if you go for a walk in a woodlot and you know your trees and can do some ID, you'll definitely see quite a bit of ash coming up. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's hopeful.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know if there's anything we can do for our forests to help not spread invasive species?
Yeah, so in terms of, like you mentioned, the oak wilt disease, don't move firewood.
Okay.
Yeah, don't move firewood. Buy firewood. If you plan on going camping somewhere, just buy it. You know,
support local anyways.
Yeah, you support local, and you know, you're going to save a couple bucks, right? Just buy local firewood, because it's you have no chance of spreading a disease like the pathogen associated with oak wilt. You can definitely, if you're hiking, if you go for hikes and things like that, make sure your shoes are clean when you enter a new property. So if you've hiked all day in one place and you plan on going somewhere else the next day, go home at night and give your shoes a really good scrub.
Okay.
Because we talked about, you know, buckthorn and that, but there's, you know, so many herbaceous things, right? And seeds get stuck to your clothes. So, you know, put on clean clothes for the next day. Give your shoes a little scrub just to get any, you know, potential seeds off of them. And then, in terms of your own, you know, personal at home, depending on where you live, if you back onto a woodlot, you know, don't throw your compost into the woodlot. You know, take it to a compost center or use your own at-home composters. Just don't expect, you know, just because you have a woodlot there, you can just throw whatever you want in there, because potentially the seeds from whatever's growing in your own garden could spread and, you know, start to negatively impact the forest. Yeah.
No, perfect. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us today and sharing us a bit about invasive species and diseases in the forest.
Yeah, no problem, Graham.
Until next time, I'll see you in nature.